Hello and welcome to the AA Beyond Belief Friday live stream. Good to see you out there, Dale and Jackie and Anchor and Joe, and I know others will be joining us really soon. My name is John. I'm your humble host, and I'm here with Angela, beaming in all the way from Boise, Idaho. How you doing, Angela?
I am doing well, thank you.
Good. I'm so glad. I'm going to need your energy because I'm depleted.
Yes, it sounds like you had a very, very busy week.
Oh
So,
yeah, it was really a lot of fun. So as you can tell from everybody out there that's in the YouTube and Facebook group watching this or listening to this, so today we're going to be talking about the value of peers in recovery, and it's a topic based upon this course I took this week to become a certified peer specialist in the state of Missouri. And it was a really interesting course. There was a lot of material. I learned a lot. I was telling Angela beforehand that it's still not yet organized in my brain. So we might be able just to go through the book that they gave me and we can talk about some of the topics that were covered and as best as I can remember them. But I have to tell you, I really enjoyed the experience because it got me outside of the 12-step mode of thinking, I guess. Angela, I was telling you, I told everybody the last time that, anytime I learn something new in recovery, whether it's be smart recovery or whatever, I'm always making comparisons to AA. And this time I really didn't. This time it really seemed fresh to me, and it seemed really based in evidence. And it was, they were talking about recovery in a way that is more tailored to individual people's needs and not necessarily like, AA has one program that we all kind of do in our own way, I guess, whereas this, we were talking about, different, harm reduction. We were talking about medicated assisted recovery. We were talking about 12 step, what you name it, and different tools that are available to use in recovery and how to support people in their recovery. So
cool.
that
Did they do like a go around and introduce yourself and why you're here and your favorite color?
they did,
Because
and
I'm curious about what other people were there,
most
other
people
backgrounds.
most people worked in the mental health field or in the recovery field. Some of them were wanting to open up recovery houses. They were all in that. Most of them, if not all of them, were in that field, and I think they thought I was too. but I was, but I'm not, obviously. And I did tell people that whenever I could, but everybody kind of was. And they might work for like a treatment center or something, and they wanted to get that certification to expand upon what they do where they work.
Okay.
Because it's a real valuable service. What a peer support specialist is, it's somebody who has lived experience in recovery, and they help people identify goals that those people want in their recovery and barriers to achieving those goals. And then they help, and they usually, the peer support specialist is working with a professional group behind them, supporting them, right? So the peer support specialist is kind of an adjunct to the therapy or treatment that they're getting from, professionals that are,
Another
yeah,
organization. Okay.
yeah. So you're there as a person with your own real life experience that they can relate to, but you also have some training so that you can identify better ways to help people, or at least point them to resources that where they can get help, or even to reach out to the team, that this professional team that's supporting you, to let them know that, hey, there's a situation here that I'm not equipped to deal with, and that you need to help with, or something like that.
Yeah.
So
How long do they generally, peer specialists, work with people?
I don't know. It kind of depends upon what facility they're attached to, I guess,
Okay.
because there's going to be different requirements or rules or whatever. But a lot of the people, I mean, it's a paid position. They don't pay very much, but they get paid, and they generally work in treatment centers and that kind of thing, hospitals and so forth. And so it's pretty much like a full-time job.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the peer specialists will, if allowed by the facility that they're attached to, will have interactions with the peers that they're working with outside of the center that they're employed by. So, they could go out and do things. They're not supposed to have a friendship relationship type of a thing. It's totally not a sponsor relationship
Mm-hmm.
at all.
Yeah, I guess that's what I was curious about, is like if there was a time limit type thing, so many
Yeah.
sessions that you have to to help somebody with. But
Yeah, there is a time
interesting.
limit, and you need to put constraints on it. Like you never want to tell somebody that you can call me anytime you want to. You have to have defined hours, and
Mm-hmm.
you need to really take care of yourself. And that was something I picked up from this is, all these people worked in recovery
Mm-hmm.
themselves. And so they said they were talking about the importance of their own self-care,
Yeah.
that when they are working as a recovery therapist or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
that it's not the same as when they go to a meeting for their own recovery. And for them, they say, like, it's not that they're being drained, they're giving and they're being drained, and they need, outside of their work that they do
Mm-hmm.
professionally, they need to go to their own meetings and take care of their own recovery in a
Right.
completely different way. So, in AA, we always say working with others and we help ourselves. And that's very true. But if you do this for a living,
Mm-hmm.
like these people that I was talking to, it's a totally different thing for them. And they need to have some boundaries for
Mm-hmm.
when they can stop their work and focus on their own recovery, because it is a different thing. I mean,
Yeah.
they're definitely, the people that were teaching the class. I mean, they obviously they're trained and have their credentials and so forth, and know what they're doing, and they know what to look for in helping people. I mean, they're very attentive to what people need in their recovery and how to talk to them in a way that can help them identify their own barriers and break through them. So,
Nice.
yeah, it was really, really, really amazing stuff to listen to and to learn from. But
Okay. So
yeah.
what's some of the stuff that they give to you to start the
Oh,
process? What did you talk about first? Or
I guess the first thing we talked about is what recovery is, and recovery is
what is
basic.
it?
It's a basically it's a process of change. It's a change that people go through to improve their health and wellness, and it's self-directed, and it's tailored to the individual. So everybody's recovery is unique to them, and it's not like you can't say that you don't want someone else's recovery. You have to have your own. And
Right.
that's what a peer support specialist will do, is help a person identify their own goals in recovery, and then how to, and the barriers to that, so that to help them get to those goals.
Okay.
So it's
So
really
what
a
does that
process of improvement.
process look like?
Well, it can look different for different people, so, and different things.
Well,
So
let's use me as an example. So say I'm new, and uh, and I come in, and I'm poor as hell, and I'm an atheist, and I'm in a small town, and AA is the only gig in town. What are some of the things that they gave you for helping someone
well,
like me? Where would you start?
the first thing that I would do is I would explain my role, what I
What
do.
What do you do?
So I'd say, okay, so I say, Angela, I'm a person in long-term recovery, and I have some experience with addiction and recovery, and I'll give you a little bit of my background. I got sober when I was 25 after having some serious life problems, and
You
for
mean never drink again?
I have not drank. I hope I don't ever drink again, but I'm not drinking. I'm sober today. Yeah. So, and then I need to let you know that anything that we say that you tell me is confidential, if something comes up that I think that your therapist needs to know about, I'll let you know that we need to let them know that, and that's for your benefit. And then I would need to let you know, when you can reach me, when I'm available. And then
Mhm.
I just basically ask you what's on your mind.
Okay.
What's on your mind?
Well, none of my stuff is really recovery related. I'm
Okay.
remodeling a room in my mom's house, and did a lot of wall work today, and painting prep and things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, interesting. So,
Yeah.
did you guys do any other role playing, or was it
Yes, we
mostly
did.
just like,
Yes, we did. We
throw
did
out a
some
bunch
role.
of information at you?
We did a lot of role playing. So, like, they talked about this way of of interviewing people to get
Hmm.
get information. So, like, you are supposed to ask like open-ended questions.
Hmm.
You don't want to ask them a question where they can just shut down by saying no or yes or whatever like that. You have to ask it in a way that draws them out. And then you always try to, anytime they say something like that, anytime they answer a question, you give them some sort of an affirmation that, some sort of positive, feedback, and you reflect back to what they're saying. We've talked about this
Okay.
before in a communication
Yeah.
stream that we did once.
So if like earlier I said, so that means I can never drink again when you said that you were
Oh,
sober. And so what would you say if, that you asked me what was on my mind, and I said,
can you never
I'm
drink again?
afraid, yeah, I'm afraid I'll, that recovery means I can never drink again. What would
Yeah.
you How would
Yeah,
you reflect that?
I'm probably going to give you the wrong answer, but I guess what I would say right now is that I can't drink again, and I would explain a little bit my understanding, I guess, of addiction, and
Hmm.
that I just don't drink for today,
Hmm.
and that I believe that if I were to drink, it would just be back to where I was. So yeah, chances are that you won't drink again. But I guess I have to be careful with that, Angela,
Yeah.
because this truly is a different. This is really tailored to other people. It's tailored to whatever your situation is, really.
Hmm.
But I think that it's safe to say for most people who have alcohol use disorder
Hmm.
that abstinence is the goal.
Is
You
that's
know,
Yeah, that's what you got from the program, that's still
Yeah. Now there are other things though where abstinence isn't the goal.
like
Like
what?
process disorders. You have to eat.
Right.
You have to have sex and things like that.
Hmm.
These are normal functions that people need to survive, and you have to have that. So that abstinence doesn't have anything to do with that. People recover from mental illness. Bipolar, schizophrenia, etc., and abstinence doesn't have anything to do with their recovery. So it goes
Okay.
beyond
So
just substance abuse.
the peer-to-peer that you um, were involved in, what included
Yeah,
mental
yeah,
health and not
yeah,
just
yeah.
addiction,
Everybody
or
that was in my group, they were not all, but there was one person who didn't, but most
Mhm.
of them were having to do with substance abuse. And
or misuse.
yes, right.
I think that, one of the things that I was most interested in talking to you about your experience with this is that, you've been in AA a very long time. And I think that it would be difficult to start to use different
Yeah,
language for things that you've, been talking about for
yeah,
years.
it
I mean,
is.
it's difficult, I think, for some people when they go to secular AA, even though that's where most of them want to be, or they've been waiting for, groups like this, or other people who think in a more open-minded or free-thinking
Hmm.
way. It's still, strange, because we get the talk from being in AA, and so sometimes I even catch myself, saying things that I'm like, wait a minute, I don't believe that. What does that actually even mean?
Hmm.
So I was curious, with you, the different ways of phrasing things.
Yeah.
One of the things you mentioned was, did you call them process disorders?
I did.
Okay, and so what does that mean? And
Yeah.
what are included?
I
You
didn't learn
named a
that from
couple of them,
I
but
didn't learn that from this class, but that would be like an eating disorder or a sex
mhm,
addiction, something like that. I guess it could be obsessive compulsive type behaviors of some sort. But
okay.
it's just a process type thing. It's not really a,
So they're comparing it, or they're describing it as a mental process, or a
I
okay.
guess. And they didn't really use that word in this training. That's something I think I picked up from Josie.
Okay. Well, yeah, you know.
So,
It's hard not to use his terminology as well because he's everywhere. Yeah.
but the language part was really interesting. One thing that they talked about early on was trying video games. Jackie says video games is huge.
Oh, yeah.
And they didn't talk about this in the training, Jackie, but my doctor, my psychiatrist, she says that she has a lot of patients who are addicted to video games
Oh, yeah.
big time. And
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
in China, they actually have like camps that they send their kids to, like these, video game uh, reform.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I saw a documentary on PBS. So anyway,
Yeah, that really is interesting. But I can imagine because it's a form of escape, isn't it? And what
yeah.
we're really addicted to, and I don't know if you agree to this or not, but I kind of understand. This is how I understand it. What we're really addicted to are those spikes of dopamine,
Mhm.
and if you're getting that from video games, then that becomes a problem, I guess. But I can also see how it could be a way to avoid dealing with life, I guess. It's a way
Yeah,
of avoiding having to deal with things. But
right.
boy, there's some great comments out there.
Yeah.
Jackie Jackie says, you mean you have to have sex? I guess you don't really have to.
Right.
I call my sponsor my mentor. Some local AA members think that's weird, but that's really how I see it. Yeah.
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 And Archer Anchor says, I agree, Paul. Alcohol use disorder is probably best. Might be accurate, but the big book describes alcoholism as an allergy, which doesn't feel very accurate. Yeah, the whole
Mhm.
language thing, it was interesting because he was talking about the importance of breaking stigmas,
Mhm.
and that a lot of the language that has been used in the recovery community seems to further stigmatize people by labeling them as whatever,
Right.
I'm an alcoholic or whatever, and
Yeah.
sometimes it gets even worse if people call themselves like a junkie or drunk or whatever. And I guess it's okay if someone wants to call themselves that in a fun way, or making fun of themselves or whatever, but I would never call someone that. So yeah, the language is really important. And as someone who is used to AA, what I found interesting was when they were talking about the language, they were also talking about, and we actually did a show on this, Angela.
We
He was
did.
talking about how we tell our stories, the correct way to tell our
Mm.
stories.
Yeah.
And he said that one problem in the recovery community, especially in 12-step programs, is that people really aren't trained to tell their story in a way that's helpful. In
Mhm.
fact, sometimes, sometimes the way a person can tells their story can actually be triggering, because
Mhm.
they're just going to focus on the use. They're just
Mhm.
going to focus on all the bad crap that happened in their life,
Mhm.
and the recovery story should really be one of hope. And you
Mhm.
don't want to spend too much time talking about all the bad crap and the craziness and all this kind of stuff, but
Right.
rather you want to talk about what you're doing to recover, you know. And I think that we kind of learn that anyway in AA, because if you go to enough speaker meetings,
Mhm.
everybody kind of gets bored by the long drunk along after a while, don't you?
Right.
It doesn't really help, that much.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, I learned that uh, the best way, and that also sharing in a meeting, if you can share like this, it's supposedly more helpful. And in some meetings I still remember to do it, but since we've gone to Zoom, sometimes I just, kind of verbally vomit in meetings.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, what did I just say? Anyway, but using, what it was like, what happened, and what
Mm-hmm.
it's like now, that's a good way, because it
Mm-hmm.
gives, just a short thing of, what kind of, how your behavior, addiction, use, misuse showed up in your life,
Yeah.
and what was the process that made it so that you're not doing that anymore, or doing it less, or have it more managed.
Yep.
And so, what was the process of that, and how has your life changed now? If you feel like you have a better understanding, control, or abstinence, whatever. So I've used that as generally my guideline when I'm like officially, speaking. But I do think that, that drunkalogs, well, I guess not drunkalogs, but sharing,
Mm-hmm.
qualifying, as they
Yeah.
say in the East, but sharing some of your experience
Yes.
is important, because I
Yes.
remember going to speaker meetings early on, and I found them the most helpful, because I could see, they would share some of the stupid stuff that they did. And so I
Mm-hmm.
was able to connect with them, because oftentimes, when they're standing up there, they look like they have their shit together, or they sound like it, or something like that.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't relate to that, kind of like the guy who's was upset because his airplane wasn't running. It
Right.
was in the shop. It's like, I cannot relate to
Right.
somebody who is
Exactly.
resentful because their personal airplane
Yeah.
isn't running. But when he shared, what his behavior was like, that was
Yes.
something I could identify with. And so then it gave me, I think, hope,
Right.
because
Right.
they had behavior like mine, and then they were able to do stuff to have their own airplane. And I'm
Right.
still waiting for that part, but
Right.
that's why I think that they have a place. I just don't think that it needs to be the whole
Yeah.
whole thing. And that's probably
Yeah.
what they were trying to
That's
talk
exactly
about, is that
exactly
sharing
because it's
some of
like
it.
they were talking about trauma a lot, and they
Mhm.
said that well, first of all, they said that that trauma, like I think it's like 80% of women
Mhm.
have experienced trauma.
Mhm.
I can't remember this, and men probably to the same extent, but the problem with men is they don't report
Right.
traumatic experiences. But
Yeah.
they were talking
Yeah.
about that and being careful not to trigger someone's trauma. And the problem
Mhm.
is, like, if you go into if you're you don't never know what's going to trigger someone's trauma. It's they talked about this a lot, but you have to be just really careful. And sometimes when one is sharing their story,
Mhm.
if they're going to go into a lot of detail about some abuse or something like that,
Right.
it really could trigger someone. And it's better just in a
Yeah.
general way to say that, I survived some abuse or whatever, and then
Mhm.
move on from that and go into, you know, the
Mhm.
recovery part. And it's not
Yeah.
that you don't want to diminish the pain that you've experienced, but you just got to be
Right.
careful not to.
Yeah, I can see that on like specifying
Mm-hmm.
possibly like certain acts. But
Mm-hmm.
when I'm sharing my story, and some people disapprove of this, but I do mention that I was molested,
Yes.
and or I say sexually abused, one of those
Right.
terms. But I do that because I've found that when I do, I have more people that come up to me and
Yeah.
thank me
Yeah.
for mentioning that, because it's part of their story, and they
Yeah.
don't
And
always hear it,
you're
or they
taking that
don't.
stigma away from it
Yeah,
too.
and quite a few times it's been men who have,
Mm-hmm.
never told anybody about it
Yeah.
before, and have asked me, if I know counselors that work
Mm.
with men. And so I started looking for that, so that I could be of
Yeah.
service in that way. So,
Yeah.
I agree somewhat with
Mm-hmm.
the triggering thing, but I also, think that it's
Yeah. You don't
it's
want
a
to not. Yeah. You need to let
yeah
people
there
know. Yeah.
yeah
Yeah.
so I'd say the specifying acts is probably not
Right.
necessary,
Right.
but some things that if me sharing that as part of my story is triggering to somebody, then they probably need to be, working on that in a different way. I think triggering is a topic right now that needs a lot more discussion about, because I think it's being tossed around quite a bit, which is why I joked about it on Facebook and said that a post I made about Pride and Prejudice might be triggering to some people because they have some major opinions about it.
I hear that a lot too, and I've never, I guess I took it a little bit. I took it pretty seriously during this training when he was talking about it, but I think and they were talking about it in this context more so in individual conversations that you have with people. And he was trying to help us recognize that if a person is experiencing trauma, to recognize it and then to get them the help they need, because I'm not equipped to deal with it. And that's the whole thing. A peer support specialist is not equipped to deal with someone's trauma at all. But if they see that someone's been triggered and in their trauma, then there is a way to somehow, get them in a safe place where they can get help for that. So
what were some of the things, do you recall, of how to recognize if somebody you're working with has been triggered?
Well, I'm gonna have to go through my materials, but one thing I do remember is they said that almost anything, it's different with every individual person. So it could be like a person might have a client in their office, and just the way they have their office set up could traumatize someone. Just the tone of a person's voice, or I might remind somebody of someone who abused them. Just so many different things that you just kind of have to be aware, and then get them the help. But it's just, it was really interesting. And it could be like, so he talked about how some people to this day, experience trauma when they see images, of the World Trade Center, being attacked, and it could be very traumatic for them. Whereas there are people who were actually there, who might not be feeling that trauma. So it can be really different.
Yeah, I think Dr. Vanderkolk talks about that quite a bit in the developmental trauma that he, teaches and talks about on that whole thing, because it's something most of us have in our minds of something that's happened in, our generation, I guess, the World Trade Center. And so I found that fascinating too, that for some people, it was something that they went through that was very difficult, but that they either received quality help for it immediately, or they already had a very strong family base, and so they didn't experience long-term trauma. And yet, some people who weren't even there and just saw it on TV, are more traumatized and have more issues with just the visuals of that. And so it's kind of interesting. Along those lines of things that you wouldn't necessarily think, for me, something that's been a trigger most of my life, and I'm aware of it, now, and it's not as big of a deal, but it is something that would be odd to somebody possibly working with a new person in this sort of way. And that's chess, because my stepfather was a jerk and taught me to play chess, but then, punished me when I won. And so I dislike chess. And so when chess is brought up or people talk about chess, I have to work with, a different part of my brain on not going to, negative spaces, and that this is different than, when I was a kid. And so that would be an unusual thing that you might have to work with, or that might come up in a session with a peer-to-peer, relationship. So I'm glad that they talked about that, that it could be stuff in the room. It could be the way it's set up. It could be, a tone of voice. sometimes just a look,
Yeah.
and anybody who's been in a long-term relationship, I think, can know that.
Yeah. It's
There's
just a
times
matter of
when
being
my partner,
informed.
just will look at me in a certain way, and,
Mm-hmm.
and I get pissed off. And so we have to work through, why did that happen? And
Yeah.
it's usually an unconscious or a subconscious trigger. And so that's interesting. I'm
I
glad
would
that
be
you guys talked
really
about that.
uncomfortable at this point dealing with anything like that with someone. But
Hmm.
Peter asked a question. I think he said it kind of sarcastically about,
Yeah.
how at AA they say, what was your part? No,
Hmm.
but the one question they said to ask somebody is, what happened to you?
Hmm.
What happened to you?
Yeah.
And they were in the woman who was we were the instructors were a man and a woman, and the
Hmm.
woman said that she once had a client where she asked that question, what happened to you? And the guy just broke down in tears, and he said,
Hmm.
nobody has ever asked me that before. Boy, I'm getting
Yeah.
chills just thinking about it. And he
Yeah.
said, a lot happened to me.
Yeah, yeah. I think that that's something that they're using in ACEs a lot, the adverse childhood
Mm-hmm.
experience,
Mm-hmm.
and it's particularly helpful with men. They were talking about because they don't always think of it that way, or they don't get asked,
Yeah.
and so it takes it away from their responsibility, because they can go to what the actual circumstances were, or what happened. So that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I can see how that could be very powerful, and possibly overwhelming too.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. So there's a lot of good stuff in this thing that I heard and learned that I don't think I ever would have learned in AA. And most of these people probably go to AA. Nobody ever
mhm,
really talked about AA by name. They would talk about 12-step programs
mhm.
and stuff like that. But most everybody probably had some experience with it.
So like Fight Club.
Yeah.
Because that is one of the things in AA and in recovery is you're not supposed to disclose that you're in AA. You can say that you're part of 12-step organizations, but
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
kind of like the first rule of Fight Club, and don't talk about Fight Club. So
Oh, that's right.
same with AA.
I got to see that movie. That movie, Fight Club. There are so many references to that movie,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I've never seen the movie, so I
It's
they kind of
really,
go over my head. I need to watch that
really,
movie one of these days. Yeah.
yeah. It's a really, really good movie. Lots of cultural references
Uh
there,
huh.
but yeah. Uh,
But they
so
talked about
cool.
also they talked about these two things, which I really had a hard time connecting, and I'm going to have to study up on this. But they talked about the 5 stages of recovery
Hmm.
and the 5 stages of change and how they interact. The
Okay.
5 stages of change I learned in smart recovery. And this
Okay.
is where you kind of go through this period of time where you begin to think that you have a problem. You start preparing to get help for the problem. You start taking action, and then you maintain that action. So you kind of go through these steps of, you
And that
know,
was the change.
yeah, it's a stage of change. So you go through like this pre-contemplation period where you're still using, but you're
Mm.
thinking that I might have a problem here. Things aren't going good. People are giving me a hard time. Blah blah blah.
Hmm.
I think that's right. Someone correct me if I'm wrong on this. I'm sure I am. And then you go through another phase, which is like contemplation, where you start taking the next. I don't know, Angela. I may be getting all messed up now, but anyway, you go through these different stages of recognizing you have a problem, eventually taking action, and then maintaining the action that you've taken. And it's just these stages that you go through of change. And then you also
Hmm.
have these changes. You have these stages of the recovery process itself, where you kind of you feel the impact the of your of your illness.
Mm.
You recognize the limitations your life that you have in life because of it, and then you begin to believe that you can change this. And after you have that belief that you can make some change, you make a commitment to it and you take action on that. So
Okay.
it's just kind of a process you go through in
Hmm.
your recovery that is probably universal. And when I think about it, that when sometimes I talk about how the steps are kind of like organic in a way where there are things that happen to you because you do kind of go through, there is kind of a natural process, I think, in a way, but that's not to say that people don't need help because even though people might want these things and might want recovery, they might not know it that they want recovery, and they have barriers and obstacles that they need to overcome. So it's interesting. Anyway, they talked about a lot of stuff, Angela. They talked about helping people who are ODing on opioids.
Okay.
So using Narcan and how to use it, where to get it, and all that kind of stuff.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just a lot of stuff we talked about. Opioids, the problem with opiates and opioid addiction, and that's where the harm reduction came in, really. And the guy who taught, and I agree with him. And when I did a podcast once about the safe injection sites in Toronto and Vancouver. And the one thing I came away with from talking to the guy about those safe injection sites is that nobody can ever recover if they're dead. You're never going to experience recovery if you're dead. And if you just can keep people alive long enough that they'll begin having conversations that might get them into recovery. And so that's where the harm reduction comes in with opioids primarily, I think, because people die easily from these overdoses, and it's needless. They don't have to. And the more people that are trained to intervene and save somebody from an overdose, the better that person has a chance to get better. But I think he said that people who practice harm reduction have a 10% or 10 times more likely to get into recovery. And that's statistically proven. So there's some good to it. And you have to be careful. That's not to say that is true for all addictions, what's harm reduction? I don't know, for alcohol, might not be a good way. And maybe there's some ways to do it, I guess. I don't know. But for opioids in particular, keep the people alive. They don't have to die from overdoses.
Right. Yeah, I can follow that.
Yeah. Yeah. And in Canada, they don't do it in the United States. And it's too bad. But in Canada, they actually have these safe injection sites. And I know it's even controversial up there. But it really does save lives. And
I think Gabor Mate talks a lot about that. And it was particularly successful in Vancouver, I've heard. So I don't have any of the links for that, but if somebody's looking,
it started in Vancouver in Canada anyway. I don't know where they probably started in Europe originally, but Vancouver was the first city in Canada, I think, that had them, and they're very successful. Boy, a huge drug problem in Vancouver, but then they started having them in Toronto too. And I don't know, is Toronto more conservative than Vancouver? It probably is. But it
might be like an East Coast, West Coast thing for the United States.
Yeah, it might be.
I think because I've never lived on the East Coast, but my partner has, and he said that it was really strange to go there and be in corporate culture, and the backstabbing and the pace of life was so much faster than West Coast, where we're like, okay, I'll get that to you right away, and it's like 2 days later.
Joe describes Toronto as a city where people are, thank God it's Monday type city. They go back to work, So anyway, but the whole thing, I guess, people in Toronto, they were not as welcoming, I guess, of the safe injection sites as they were in Vancouver, but they got them there, and then a bunch of them popped up where they're not really sanctioned by the government, but they're tolerated because hell, it's saving people's lives. But anyway, that's kind of getting off the topic. But I don't know how I got there, but we talked about that.
Paula H. mentions the Sinclair Method. Did they talk about that at all?
No, they did not talk about that. But I think that would fall into the harm reduction. And again, if somebody's doctor is prescribing them that and to be used in that way, then I would support it. If it's working, recovery is going to look different for everybody. And I don't, I've talked to people about the Sinclair method. I guess that there's some efficacy to it. I don't know. I'm not
Hmm.
an expert at all, but yeah, I think that that's a valid way that some people might find recovery. I
Okay.
actually spoke with someone on another podcast I do, Katie Lane. Look her up on YouTube. She's an amazing person, and she talks about the Sinclair method, and she has groups. And you'd be surprised a lot of people that start with the Sinclair method who actually go on and maintain abstinence.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's not like I don't even know if most of them actually drink on naltrexone on a permanent basis. I think a lot of them
Mhm.
just go on to achieve abstinence, because what happens is they go through this period apparently where you just don't have the effect of it doesn't do anything for you.
Mhm.
So, but
Yeah.
so I get Sinclair method. Yes, I think that would be harm reduction, but they did not talk about that. They did not talk about that because I don't think it happens much in the United States. It might be happening more now, but probably doesn't happen a whole lot in Missouri. I'm imagining.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not sure if it's specifically the Sinclair method, but it does seem like the medication assisted is used more with the VA now,
Yeah.
than than in I guess mainstream uh, hospital, things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I can't think of the words I'm trying to say, but yeah, I know it's helped several people here. Did they the Was most of the program secular based
Yeah.
that you guys talked about, most of the solutions and
Yes.
such, and then did religion or spirituality or any of
Yes.
that come up?
Unfortunately. Yes.
So
Yes, it did. So they,
so how
they,
did they handle that?
they
I
had
mean,
one session on spirituality. Oh my
okay.
God, Angela. And so this is the one thing, if I could do over again, I wish I would have just kept my mouth shut. But but they said at the beginning, if you're triggered, let us know.
And
So
you said I'm triggered, and
I
you even
did. And I
mentioning
was
it.
really pissed off too, because everything was going great. And all of a sudden they had to have this thing on spirituality. And the woman teacher, she said, "Oh, I love this topic. This is my most important favorite thing, blah, 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 blah." And I said, "Wait a second. I'm going to have a problem with this." And I told them why, but I shut up and I listened, and basically, the guy said, "Listen, spirituality does not have to be connected to a higher power, does not have to be related to religion, but I have to understand too that if I'm going to move on in the greater recovery community outside of the secular recovery community,
Hmm.
that I'm going to meet people who have for whom spirituality and religion might be important, and it's something that they can use as part of their recovery."
Right.
And if that's the case, then I need to understand that and respect that.
Yeah.
So, but at the same time, it's not for me totally. And yeah, I did have a really hard time with that.
Did
Um,
anybody else there?
no, but I told them, I said, I told them I'm an atheist. I even sent them the link to the A Beyond Belief podcast and everything.
I'm kind of a big deal. Yeah.
Well, I told them, I said, because they were like, they did. I just wanted them to know, listen, there's a lot of people out there who don't want this religious crap in their recovery. I didn't say it that way, but I just said there's a lot of people out
Because you were
there.
triggered. I get it.
Mhm. I was pissed off. I was really pissed off.
Oh.
But I do wish I would have just shut up and just listened, but I had to make a big deal out of it.
Yeah, I'll
But
give you
they were
the condescending keep coming back.
they were nice. I said, "Oh, thank you so much for letting us know." But everybody was very nice, So they talked me down, talked me back from the ledge, I guess.
That's funny. So
Yeah.
they were demonstrating to the other people how to handle someone like you. Yeah.
Right.
Uh,
But for the most part, people weren't talking about that kind of stuff. For the most part, Paula said she would be pissed off too. Yeah, I was.
yeah.
But for the most part, people weren't talking about that. It was all very much based in evidence and research
Mhm.
and that kind of stuff. And again, a peer support specialist is not it has definite limitations,
Right.
so this is
Yeah, and I
really.
like that.
Hmm.
And that's I think something that we can talk about, within, secular AA, if that's what people are
Hmm.
doing, because we don't really. I mean, sometimes, there are things like that'll be said on that you can't get someone sober, and
Yeah.
stuff like that. But as far
Yeah.
as I was chatting with somebody last night who contacted me via the community at large. And so doesn't really do the kind of meetings I do or anything like that, and is newer in recovery. And so basically I'm just kind of acting as a sober buddy for her.
Hmm.
And she is going through some different stuff. And so we talked about therapy and how, I thought that was very beneficial. And sometimes that's where people get to where they really just need to go to a therapist. That, yes, going to 12-step meetings or having a community is important, but there are certain issues or certain times in your life where you're coming up against difficulties that you really need somebody who's trained to be
Yeah.
able to guide you through, because they'll be able to see what your strengths and weaknesses are, and possibly help you through the process, or connect you with somebody else who would be able to help you in a better way.
Hmm.
And so she was kind of surprised, because a lot of people say the steps are going to help you, and sometimes they can, and particularly if that's one of your only options, which for some people it is.
Yeah.
For me, I had some therapy before, but it was very helpful because it was a structured way of trying to examine my thoughts and behaviors. And I was poor. But I think that as years have gone by, therapists have actually been, the ones to help me with some of the things that would continue to drive me to behavior that I would not like to engage in.
Hmm. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Joe want to know about long-term results. They didn't really share like a lot of statistics or anything like that, Joe. So I don't really know about that. But I think that this whole idea of peer support has shown to be helpful.
Hmm.
I think every state in the United States has this. And apparently they have peer support specialists in the hospitals and everything like that. It's an inexpensive way
Hmm.
to add to a person's toolkit, I
Hmm.
guess, of help that they get, and it's a good way to help them have someone that's in kind of in their corner, I guess, that has
Hmm.
that same experience, who they can trust, and also having a little bit of training really does help. One thing I
Yeah.
was thinking about is it would be kind of nice if we had like ethics that we had to take to be a sponsor, ethics courses, something like that, because like, for this, you have ethical, you have to follow a code of ethics. You have
Hmm.
to, because you're licensed by the state,
Right.
and it's really important. And, it's too bad that that our sponsorship, there should be a high standard of ethics too, I think. And there should be and it'd be nice if there was a little bit more, like something like I did, I would think would be helpful, but that's okay. I mean, AA works really well for a lot of people, for many, many people. And it just works based upon, that social connection, which is really
Right.
important in anyone's recovery, and it really does help. And I know a
Yeah.
lot of people in AA get outside help, which is
Hmm.
super. And I did
Hmm.
for sure, and I'm glad that I did. So yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I think that in some areas, they do workshops and stuff
they
for
do, they
sponsorship,
do.
and I think that those are really helpful. I don't know that they do them enough. I mean,
Yeah,
it's still not, you don't have to sign any sort of ethics thing, but it does give some guidance, and I think, helps people in a way where they can see different perspectives on sponsoring. You can kind of hear them in bits and pieces in meetings, but I know when they've done workshops that it's been kind of cool to see how different people consider, sponsorship, what they consider their role is as a sponsor, and how to do things.
I think
So
sponsor
I think,
workshops would be an excellent idea.
yeah, I think that would be good. So as something that would improve
Oh yeah,
within AA. But I
absolutely.
also, I get torn on
Mm,
it, because there are times when, I am grateful to AA, and I think there's a lot of good in it, as far as the population that it can help. It is the biggest gig in town that's free for people. So I do still work within it and participate in it. But I still would like to see a greater community of recovery where we don't have to be anonymous,
yes, yes,
like you learned in this, it's not a stigma.
right.
There's so many things that can be helpful, when I
Mm-hmm.
share my recovery for other people, and help them feel less alone. And so, I'm hoping as society progresses, if it does,
Yeah.
that we'll be able to have those kind of communities. And I
Yep.
think that having stuff like this that's coming up, and making many states ACEs aware. And
Mm-hmm.
I still think that California and Washington are the state are leading the way in
Mm-hmm.
that. That's really helpful
Mm-hmm.
as well. And so, yeah, so I'm hopeful that there'll be more resources for people,
Mm-hmm.
so that the stuff that is less helpful in AA will not be able to do harm anymore, because there'll be more options.
Joe was asking about how we find each other. Well, there's a huge network, and this, so in Missouri, there's the Missouri Recovery Network,
Mm-hmm.
and so Angela, this kind of goes to your point about anonymity. So I'm not anonymous at this level. Now
Mm-hmm.
I'll be anonymous in AA because I have to respect that.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as just being a person in recovery, I
Mm-hmm.
want to be out in the open about that. And
Yeah.
what's cool about this, what I'm glad I did about this, is that I'm now hooked up with these people all over my state who are in recovery and care about issues for people in recovery.
Mm-hmm.
And not only that, Angela, but I'm also connected with people who work for the state,
Right.
and will work with the legislature and so forth.
Yeah, can help lobby.
Hmm. So I'm part of a now, like, it's like, I'm just kind of getting my feet wet, but I
Mm-hmm.
really feel like, this is something that, I can really, I don't know, it maybe make a difference a little bit in just by being open as a person in recovery here in my state, and by working with this Missouri Recovery Network, and learning about, what the state legislature can do differently or whatever, and advocating for that, or helping to advocate for that,
Yeah.
is a good thing. And that's one thing they did talk about too, is using language that people outside of recovery will understand, So it's
Yeah.
like, if you're going to go to your state legislature and just say that you're an alcoholic, it might not go over real well.
Yeah.
But if you tell them you're a person in long-term recovery,
Mm-hmm.
and then explain that, then it's just a different way of talking to people. There's one way of talking to people, like if you're in a 12-step community where everybody speaks the same language,
Yeah.
and you can say something like, I'm a grateful recovering alcoholic and all this kind of crap, right? And everybody understands what it says. But if you go to your congressman and you say, I'm a grateful recovering alcoholic, all this bullshit, it doesn't
Right.
really make sense. So that was kind of interesting. The whole language thing I just found really, 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 really interesting. Peter loves that book, Living Sober. Living Sober book tells me that sponsors only have one tool: sharing experience, strength, and hope. I'm wary of any formalizing or training around it. The culture around it can be dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just think, I don't know. I guess that my problem with sponsorship in AA is that it can
Mhm,
get out of control. I
mhm,
don't like. I agree with you that it should just be sharing experience, strength, and hope. But unfortunately, that's not what happens.
mhm,
People have abused their sponsor relationship, and I think that if we spent just as much time talking about how to be an ethical sponsor as we
mhm.
do about, pounding the big book and all that other crap, that maybe it would help a little bit. I don't know. But
Yeah, and it's so different in different areas of what, sponsors do and don't do, and that yeah, I find that just having, peers in sobriety seems to be helpful,
yeah.
and that yeah, I seem to be moving away from that kind of relationship with
Hmm.
people. I'm still helping people, and if they, have questions about how to do the steps in a secular way, I'm still helping
Yeah.
them with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I find a sober buddy to be more
Yes.
helpful, and that
Yes.
at this point in my life, I don't really, I don't really have a sponsor. The person who's been my sponsor for a long time, we just kind of have a sober relationship, because she contacts me for things that are tough for her as well,
Hmm.
or things she's struggling with. And so it's just really more of, yeah, a sober buddy to talk about these things with. And then, a couple of people that I've sponsored over the year, that's our relationship now as well. Is, it's not like hey, I'm calling you because you're my sponsor and shit hit
Right.
the fan. It's
Right.
not like that anymore. And so, I don't know if other places and other people are moving in that direction. It sounds like within the secular community
Hmm.
that is definitely more of a thing than
I hear
it
more people using
probably
the word
is.
mentor now. I
Yeah.
hear that at my group a lot. I hear that around, someone here used it in the
Hmm.
chat room. Mentor is used quite a bit, and I like that word. I consider, Bree's sponsor. No, it's Bree's sponsor is Jenny, but I and Jenny's. If I have anything that's close to a sponsor, it would be Julie, and she's going to be
Hmm.
my mentor or my proctor for the exam. But
Hmm.
she's someone that I look up to, as I can see as a mentor.
Hmm.
She's not like somebody that tells me what to do or anything like that. But
Hmm.
I'm
You trust her
I trust
experience,
her. I
and
trust her and respect
yeah,
her. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So and she's smart and she's someone I trust. What can I say?
Okay, well, now
So
we know what your criteria is.
yeah, that's all I need. That's all I need. Yeah. So anyway, I hope that I hope this episode was helpful for you all. And thank you, Angela, for
Hmm.
talking with me. It helped me a lot because I just kind of finished. I'm not even finished completely. I still have more stuff to do and a lot of studying to do. And I wasn't really didn't have this all organized in my head. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And there's still a lot that I still need to go over and learn still. Because it was just all kind of, you sit down on a Zoom call for 5 hours and it's so freaking tiring. And then you
Yeah.
have to go watch these videos for hours on end, and then they test you
Hmm.
to make sure you watched it. You know, this is great. We have this training at work, which is so stupid because it's all you. I can just like fast forward the video and do the training. I'm done, right? Oh
Hmm.
man, not this thing. They ask you little questions like that have nothing to do with the material, but just to make sure that you actually watch the video.
Right.
Oh damn!
Yeah.
So you had to
Those are
watch it.
those are rough.
Hmm.
Yeah. So you can't do like I do on most of my YouTube videos, where I have it at 1.5 or 2 point speed or something like that, where they're
Right.
talking like a chipmunk, because they're just too slow.
Yeah, the videos are horrible. God, I can't stand sitting through those. But anyway, so I've got quite a bit of those. But anyway, thank you, Angela, for helping talk me through this. And we'll
Yeah.
probably be using some of this material in some future podcasts. There's just all kinds of great topics that I got from this training. So
Yeah, I would love
yeah,
to talk more about the harm reduction, and learn
yeah,
more about that.
And I'm
Yeah,
looking
it
forward
sounds
to
great.
just, I'm now in, like I said, 2 different Facebook groups for peer support. I'm in this Show Me Echo group where they talk about, where I'll have these Zoom meetings to do continuing education. So I'm really just kind of getting my feet wet in a broader community of people in recovery. And I'm really excited about that. So
Yeah, sounds
yeah,
like fun.
it's been fun. So thank you. Boy, it's so funny. We say this every week, but I start off exhausted, tired. I don't know how it's going to turn out, but it's somehow, Angela, you always make this thing possible. We always get through this and it turns out okay. So thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for your
Yeah, thank
comments in
you.
the chat room and for listening and for all your support. Boy, we got stuff coming up this weekend. I should say real quick, let me look at the calendar because I know emotional sobriety is happening and you're going to want to go to that. Emotional sobriety is on Sunday, January the 31st, and it is at 12 o'clock p.m. Central Time. Figure out what time that is for you, and Josie will be talking there. So there you go.
Nice. All right, sounds good.
And that's it.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye, everybody. It's another episode of AA Beyond Belief. We'll be back again next week with another live stream. Until then, y'all take care. Be well.